Sarah Martinez had always been the quiet type, the kind of woman who preferred reading books in coffee shops to going out to loud bars. At 28, she worked as a librarian at the downtown public library, spending her days helping children find adventure stories and assisting elderly patrons with computer troubles. Her life was peaceful, predictable, and exactly how she liked it. That Tuesday evening started like any other. Sarah had finished her shift at 6 and decided to stop by Murphy's Diner for her usual chicken sandwich before heading home. The small, family-owned restaurant had been her favorite spot for years, with its checkered tablecloths and the smell of fresh coffee that always made her feel at home. She was sitting in her regular booth near the window, quietly eating and scrolling through her phone, when she noticed the man at the counter getting increasingly agitated. He was tall, probably in his 30s, with broad shoulders and a voice that carried across the small diner even when he wasn't shouting. "I said I wanted my burger medium rare, not well done," slammed his fist on the counter, making the cash register jump. The teenage waitress behind the counter, barely 17 and clearly new to the job, stepped back with tears forming in her eyes. "I'm sorry, sir. I can ask the cook to make you another one," Emma stammered, her hands shaking as she reached for her notepad. "You can ask the cook, you can ask." His voice rose to a roar. "I've been waiting 20 minutes already. This is ridiculous." Other customers in the diner began to look uncomfortable. An elderly couple near the door exchanged worried glances, and a mother with 2 young children started gathering her things to leave. The tension in the small restaurant was becoming unbearable. Sarah watched the scene unfold, feeling her heart rate increase. She had always hated confrontation, always been the type to avoid conflict at all costs. But something about seeing this grown man intimidate a teenager who was just trying to do her job made her stomach turn. "Look, sweetheart," leaned across the counter, his face inches from Emma's. "I work construction all day, I'm tired, I'm hungry, and I don't have time for incompetent little girls who can't take a simple order." Emma's hands were visibly trembling now. "Please, sir, I'll get the manager." "The manager? Where is this mysterious manager?" laughed bitterly. "Let me guess, he's in the back, probably as useless as you are." Sarah found herself standing up before she even realized what she was doing. Her legs felt shaky, but something inside her wouldn't let her just sit there and watch this continue. "Excuse me," she said, her voice softer than she intended. She cleared her throat and tried again, louder this time. "Excuse me, sir." Turned around, his angry expression shifting to one of annoyance. "What? Maybe you could take it easy on her? She's just trying to help." Sarah's voice was still quiet, but every person in the diner could hear her in the sudden silence that had fallen over the room. Stared at her for a moment, his eyes narrowing. "And who asked for your opinion, lady?" Sarah felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment, but she pressed on. "I just think there's no need to be so aggressive. Mistakes happen, and she's doing her best to fix it." "Mistakes happen," took a step toward her booth. "I pay good money for my food, and I expect to get what I ordered. This doesn't concern you, so why don't you mind your own business?" The diner fell completely silent except for the soft country music playing from the old jukebox in the corner. Sarah could feel every eye in the place on her, and she regretted speaking up. This was exactly why she avoided confrontation, but she couldn't take it back now. "I understand you're frustrated," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But there's no reason to take it out on someone who's just trying to do their job." His expression darkened further. "Listen, sweetheart, I don't know what kind of world you live in where people don't have to be accountable for their mistakes, but in the real world, when someone screws up, there are consequences." "Getting angry and intimidating people isn't consequences," Sarah replied, surprised by her own boldness. "It's just being a bully." The word hung in the air like a challenge. His face turned red, and Sarah immediately knew she had crossed a line. She should have kept quiet. She should have minded her own business, like he said. "A bully," his voice was dangerously low now. "You think I'm a bully?" Sarah opened her mouth to apologize, to take it back, but was already moving toward her table. His massive frame cast a shadow over her booth, and she realized just how big he really was. Her mouth went dry. "Maybe you need to learn when to keep your mouth shut," said, standing directly in front of her table now. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. "I didn't mean to." "Yeah, you didn't mean to, but you did." Placed both hands on her table and leaned down so his face was level with hers. "You called me a bully in front of all these people. Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" Sarah shook her head, genuinely terrified now. She could smell the alcohol on his breath and realized he had probably been drinking before he even came into the diner. This was so much worse than she had initially thought. I work construction, lady. I lift steel beams all day. I deal with real problems, not whatever little fairy tale world you live in where everyone gets participation trophies. His voice was getting louder again. So when some little librarian thinks she can lecture me about how to behave, it really gets under my skin. Sarah's blood ran cold. How did he know she was a librarian? Had he been watching her? The thought made her feel sick. Please, she said quietly. I was just trying to help. I'll mind my own business now. Oh, now you want to mind your own business. Now that you see I'm not going to just take your little lecture and walk away, straightened up but didn't step back from her table. It's too late for that. The entire diner was watching now, but nobody was moving to help. The elderly couple looked scared, the mother with the children had already left, and even the cook had come out from the kitchen to see what was happening. Emma, the teenage waitress, was crying silently behind the counter. I think you owe me an apology, said. A real apology for calling me a bully and sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. Sarah nodded quickly. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry, I shouldn't have said anything. That's not good enough, shook his head. Stand up. What? I said stand up. You wanted to get involved in my business, so now you're going to face the consequences like an adult. Sarah's hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip the edge of the table. I don't want any trouble. Please, I just want to go home. Should have thought of that before you opened your mouth, reached across the table and grabbed her wrist. I said stand up. Sarah felt panic rising in her chest as grip tightened on her wrist. She had never been in a physical confrontation in her entire life. She didn't know what to do, didn't know how to get out of this situation. All she could think about was how much she wished she had just stayed quiet and minded her own business. Let go of me, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Or what? Laughed. What are you going to do about it, sweetheart? That was when the door of the diner opened with a soft chime, and a new customer walked in. James Cooper stepped through the door of Murphy's diner and immediately sensed the tension in the room. After 12 years as a Navy SEAL, he had developed an instinct for dangerous situations, and every alarm bell in his head was going off right now. He was still wearing his civilian clothes from his job interview earlier that day. After retiring from the military 6 months ago, James had been struggling to find his place in the normal world. The transition from high-stakes special operations to everyday life had been harder than he expected. Tonight, he had just wanted a quiet meal before driving back to his small apartment across town. James was average height, maybe 5'10", with a lean but muscular build that most people wouldn't look at twice. He had learned long ago that being underestimated was often an advantage. His dark hair was cut short, and he moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced real danger and lived to tell about it. His eyes quickly scanned the diner, taking in the scene. An elderly couple huddled together near the door, looking frightened. A teenage waitress behind the counter was crying. And in the center of it all, a large man was gripping the wrist of a woman who looked absolutely terrified. James had seen enough combat zones to recognize a predator when he saw one. The man was using his size to intimidate someone much smaller and weaker than himself. It was the kind of behavior that made James's jaw clench with barely controlled anger. Please, Sarah was saying, her voice shaking. You're hurting me. Tightened his grip. Maybe next time you'll think twice before getting in someone's face. James walked slowly toward the counter, pretending to study the menu posted on the wall. He wanted to get a better read on the situation before he acted. In the SEAL teams, rushing into a scenario without proper intelligence was a good way to make things worse. Let go of her, the elderly man near the door finally spoke up, his voice trembling with age and fear. Turned toward him with a sneer. Mind your own business, old man, unless you want some of this too. That was all James needed to hear. He had spent his military career protecting people who couldn't protect themselves, and he wasn't about to stop now just because he was wearing civilian clothes. Excuse me, James said calmly, approaching from behind. His voice was steady and controlled, with just a hint of the authority he had learned to project during his years leading special operations teams. Turned around, still gripping Sarah's wrist. Great, another hero, what do you want? James looked him over carefully. Was bigger than him, probably outweighed him by 50 pounds and clearly had experience with physical labor. But James had learned that size and strength were only part of the equation in any confrontation. Mental preparation, technical skill, and the ability to stay calm under pressure usually mattered more. "I want you to let go of the lady and step away from her table," James said simply. "Laughed, or what tough guy? Or I'll make you let go of her." The confidence in James's voice was unmistakable, and something about it made pause. He studied James more carefully, taking in his posture, the way he stood with his feet shoulder-width apart, the calm expression on his face despite the obvious threat. "You think you can take me?" finally asked. "I don't think anything," James replied. "I'm just asking you politely to let go of the lady and leave her alone." Released Sarah's wrist and turned to face James fully. Sarah immediately scooted as far back in the booth as she could, rubbing her wrist where red marks were already forming. "You know what your problem is?" said, stepping closer to James. "You think you're some kind of tough guy because you're willing to stick up for some random woman, but you have no idea what you're getting yourself into." James didn't move, didn't even blink. "I have a pretty good idea." "Oh, really? And what's that?" "I think you're used to picking on people who can't fight back. Teenagers, women, elderly people. I think you're a coward who uses his size to make himself feel important." James's voice remained perfectly calm, but every word was chosen for maximum impact. His face turned bright red. "A coward? You're calling me a coward?" "If the shoe fits." That was when threw the first punch. James had been expecting it. He had seen the tension building in his shoulders, the slight shift in his weight that telegraphed the incoming attack. James moved his head just enough to let the punch slide past his ear, then stepped forward and grabbed his extended arm. Using his own momentum against him, James twisted the arm and swept his leg, sending the larger man crashing into an empty table. Plates and glasses scattered across the floor with a tremendous crash. Scrambled to his feet, his face now a mixture of rage and confusion. "Lucky shot," he snarled. James shook his head. "That wasn't luck, and this doesn't have to continue. You can walk out that door right now and we can forget this ever happened." "Forget it," wiped blood from his lip where he had hit the table. "Nobody puts their hands on me and walks away." Charged forward like an angry bull, swinging wildly. James easily and delivered a precise strike to solar plexus that doubled him over, gasping for air. While was bent over, James grabbed him by the collar and guided him firmly but not violently toward the door. "I really think you should leave," James said quietly, "before this gets any worse for you." Straightened up, still breathing hard. "You have no idea who you're messing with. I could crush you." "Maybe," James agreed. "But you haven't yet, and I'm giving you a chance to leave with what's left of your dignity." Something in James's tone finally penetrated its rage. For the first time since the confrontation began, he really looked at the man standing in front of him. James wasn't even breathing hard. His clothes weren't wrinkled. He looked like he had just asked about the weather instead of putting a man 50 pounds heavier on the floor twice in less than 2 minutes. "Who are you?" asked. James considered the question. He could mention his military background, the years of training, the countless missions in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. But that would be showing off, and James had never been the type to brag about his service. "I'm someone who doesn't like bullies," he said instead. Looked around the diner at all the faces staring at him. The elderly couple, the teenage waitress, Sarah still huddled in her booth, even the cook watching from the kitchen doorway. They had all seen him get handled like a child by someone half his size. The humiliation was worse than any physical pain. "This isn't over," said, but the fight had gone out of his voice. "Yes, it is," James replied firmly. "It's completely over. You're going to walk out that door, get in your car, and drive away, and you're not going to come back here and bother anyone else." Wanted to argue, wanted to throw another punch, wanted to prove that he wasn't the coward James had called him. But something about the way James was looking at him made it clear that continuing this fight would be a very bad idea. Without another word, turned and walked out of the diner. Through the window, everyone watched him get into a pickup truck and drive away with his tires squealing. The diner was completely silent for a long moment before the elderly woman started clapping. Soon, everyone was applauding, and Emma the waitress was wiping tears from her eyes and smiling for the first time all evening. James felt uncomfortable with the attention. He walked over to Sarah's booth and crouched down next to her table. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. Sarah looked up at him with wide eyes, still shaking slightly from the adrenaline. "I think so, thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't." "You don't need to thank me," James said. "But maybe next time don't try to handle guys like that on your own. Some people are just looking for an excuse to hurt someone." Sarah nodded, then looked at him more carefully. "How did you do that? Make it look so easy, I mean." James was quiet for a moment, considering how much to tell her. "I had some training." Before Sarah could ask what kind of training, Emma the waitress approached their table with a pot of coffee and a grateful smile. "Can I get you both some coffee?" Emma asked, her voice still a little shaky but much brighter than before. "On the house. It's the least I can do after what you did for me." James stood up and smiled at the teenager. "That's very kind of you, but you don't owe me anything. You were just doing your job, and nobody should have to deal with that kind of treatment." "Please," Emma insisted. "I really want to do something to thank you. That man scared me so much, and I didn't know what to do." James looked at Sarah, who nodded gratefully. "Coffee would be wonderful," she said. "I don't think I'm ready to go home just yet." As Emma went to get their coffee, James slid into the booth across from Sarah. Up close, he could see she was still trembling slightly, and the red marks on her wrist were becoming more pronounced. "You should put some ice on that," he said, gesturing to her wrist. Sarah looked down at the marks and winced. "I can't believe he grabbed me like that. I've never had anyone put their hands on me before." "Bullies like that count on people being too scared or too polite to fight back," James said. "What you did took courage, standing up to him in the first place, I mean." "Courage?" Sarah laughed bitterly. "I was terrified the whole time. I just couldn't stand watching him treat that poor girl so badly." James studied her face. "Being scared doesn't mean you weren't brave. It means you were brave despite being scared. That's the only kind of courage that really matters." Emma returned with 2 steaming cups of coffee and a small bag of ice wrapped in a towel. "For your wrist," she said to Sarah. "And thank you both again. I was so scared I was about to quit my job right there." "How long have you been working here?" James asked. "Just 2 weeks. This is my first job ever, and I really needed to help my mom with bills." Emma's eyes filled with tears again. "If you hadn't shown up, I don't know what I would have done." "You would have figured it out," James said gently. "Sometimes the world throws horrible situations at us, and we discover we're stronger than we thought." After Emma went back to work, Sarah and James sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, sipping their coffee. Sarah pressed the ice to her wrist and studied the man across from her. He was nothing like what she had expected a hero to look like. No cape, no dramatic muscles, just a quiet confidence that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside. "You said you had some training," she finally said. "What kind of training teaches someone to handle a situation like that?" James hesitated. He had learned to be careful about discussing his military background with civilians. Some people reacted strangely when they found out he had been in special forces. They either treated him like he was dangerous, or they wanted to hear war stories he didn't want to tell. "Military training," he said simply. "What branch?" James looked into his coffee cup. "Navy." "Like on a ship." Despite everything that had happened, James found himself smiling. "Not exactly. I was with a special operations unit. We did different kinds of missions." Sarah's eyes widened. "Special operations, like what they show in movies." "Movies usually get it wrong," James said. "But yes, sort of. High-risk situations, dangerous places, that kind of thing." "How long did you do that?" 12 years. I retired 6 months ago." Sarah was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "Is that why you stepped in tonight? Because you're trained to handle dangerous people?" James shook his head. "I stepped in because it was the right thing to do. The training just made it easier." "Easier?" Sarah laughed. "That man was huge, and you made it look like you were dealing with a child having a tantrum." "Size isn't everything in a fight," James said. "And most bullies don't actually know how to fight. They're used to people backing down because of their size or their aggression. When someone doesn't back down, they don't know what to do." Sarah studied his face. "You've dealt with bullies before." "Different kinds. But yeah, the principle is the same. Whether it's some drunk guy in a bar or a terrorist with a machine gun, bullies depend on fear. Take away the fear and they lose most of their power." "Weren't you afraid tonight?" James considered the question. I was alert, I was focused, but no, I wasn't afraid. After some of the things I've seen and done, a drunk construction worker doesn't really register as a serious threat. What kinds of things have you seen and done? James was quiet for a long time. Things I try not to think about anymore. Sarah realized she had pushed too hard. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry into something personal. It's not personal exactly, it's just complicated. When you spend years in war zones, doing things most people can't imagine, it changes you. Coming back to normal life is harder than people think. Is that why you're here, having trouble adjusting? James nodded. I had a job interview today, actually, security consulting. It went well, I think, but it's strange going from leading teams in combat operations to sitting in an office talking about protecting corporate executives. That must be a huge change. Everything is a huge change. This morning I was worried about whether my tie looked professional enough. 6 months ago I was worried about staying alive in places where people were actively trying to kill me. James laughed, but there was no humor in it. Sometimes I wonder if I made a mistake retiring. Do you miss it, the military? I miss the purpose, James said after thinking about it. I miss knowing that what I was doing mattered, that I was making a difference. I miss my team, the guys I served with. They were like family. Sarah looked at him with new understanding. But you did make a difference tonight. You probably saved Emma from getting hurt, and you definitely saved me from something much worse than what happened. Maybe, but it's not the same as protecting your country or rescuing hostages or stopping terrorists from hurting innocent people. It is the same, Sarah said firmly. You protected innocent people tonight. Just because it was in a diner instead of some foreign country doesn't make it less important. James looked at her with surprise. I never thought of it that way. Well, maybe you should. There are bullies everywhere, not just in war zones. And there are innocent people who need protecting everywhere too. Sarah leaned forward. What you did tonight mattered to Emma. It mattered to me. It probably mattered to everyone in this diner who saw that there are still good people in the world willing to stand up for what's right. For the first time in months, James felt something he had almost forgotten, a sense of purpose. You know, when I walked in here tonight, I was feeling pretty sorry for myself, wondering if I had made the right choice leaving the military, wondering if I'd ever find a place in civilian life. And now I'm thinking maybe I was looking at it all wrong. Maybe the mission isn't over, maybe it just changed. They sat in comfortable silence again, watching Emma cheerfully serve other customers who had come in after the incident. The diner felt peaceful again, safe again, like nothing bad could happen there. I should probably get going, Sarah finally said. It's getting late and I have work tomorrow. I'll walk you to your car, James said, standing up. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do. That guy might be waiting outside, and even if he's not, it's just the right thing to do. As they walked toward the door, Emma called out to them. Wait, I never got your names. I'm Sarah and this is James. Thank you, James and Sarah, really. I'll never forget what you did for me tonight. Outside in the parking lot, James walked Sarah to her small blue Civic. The night air was cool and crisp, and the stars were visible above the streetlights. Thank you, Sarah said as she unlocked her car door. Not just for tonight, but for the conversation too. I needed to hear what you said about courage. What did I say about courage? That being scared doesn't mean you're not brave. I've spent my whole life avoiding confrontation, avoiding conflict, playing it safe. But maybe playing it safe isn't always the right choice. James nodded. Sometimes the right thing to do is also the scary thing to do. Will you come back to the diner sometime? Sarah asked. I'd like to buy you dinner to properly thank you. James smiled. I'd like that, but only if you let me buy you dinner instead. After what you went through tonight, you deserve to be treated like the hero you are. Hero? Sarah laughed. All I did was run my mouth and almost get myself hurt. No, James said seriously. You saw someone being hurt and you decided to act. You didn't know help was coming. You didn't know if anyone else would stand up. You just knew it was wrong and you decided to try to stop it. That's exactly what a hero does. As Sarah drove away, James stood in the parking lot for a moment, looking back at the warm lights of Murphy's diner. For the first time since leaving the military, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. Tomorrow he would start his new job. Tomorrow he would continue building his new life as a civilian. But he would never forget the lesson he learned tonight. The mission to protect innocent people never really ends. It just takes different forms, happens in different places, requires different kinds of courage. And sometimes, just sometimes, it happens in a small diner where a scared librarian finds her voice, and a retired Navy SEAL remembers what it means to serve.